Alrighty. I think I figured out how to get rid of that ding 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 until I said it. Alright, so the missing 13th Amendment. I'm arm length. I have not did a whole lot of research. What little I've understand it, I am led to believe there is such thing out there. And, right, because words have changed over history, right? Um, the British are coming, the British are coming. History shows that wasn't true. Why? Because they was Brits. Okay, it was the redcoats were coming, and allegedly, it was a 16-year-old girl that ran on a horseback, but they could not have a girl saying this and be a kind of a hero warning about the redcoats showing up. So, can history, with changing the words, change history? Right? And let's kind of dig in a little bit with this. William Wagner, go check out his videos. I have not seen very many. In fact, I've seen maybe a couple periodically through years. Okay. But I came across this one and I didn't hear him talk about the 13th original amendment. But I'll tell you guys here in a little bit what I think of it.
And we're all supposed to be equal under the law. Hello? But we're not. We're not equal. You know why? Some people can run for offices that you and I cannot run for. They're called judges. And you can't run for it. And they're called district attorney. And you and I can't run for it. But once upon a time, anybody could run for judge. And in fact, lawyers were forbidden to be judges. They could not be judges. They could not be elected judges. They wouldn't even let them into. They wouldn't even let them into the courtroom. Bailiffs would keep the lawyers out, and they snuck in because they wrote people's wills on their last testaments, and then they had controversy, and so the lawyer had to come into the courtroom to testify as to the will of somebody that died, and some descendant is saying, I got cheated. And so that's how they wiggle their way back into the courtroom. And now they've created bar associations over the last 75 years and said only lawyers can be judges. This is nonsense.
Okay, so we're going to park right there. I agree with him. In fact, before the bar unions came in and intervened in our constitutional rights, um, even judges actually had to own land, right? They had to have a bond, and that ownership of the land can be taken if the judge violated your rights, right? They got sovereign citizen immunity now, but at the time, if your rights were violated, you go confiscate the property. You heard some of these sovereign citizens out there take, you know, filing paperwork to take the judge's property way a couple of years ago. It's kind of dialed down, but they was going by the original intent of the founding fathers. It wasn't going by today's judge's sovereign citizen immunity.
Track down the man that got the documents and printed the last copy of the original 13th. His name is Alfred Adask. And I had to go to the hill country of Tennessee. And believe me, it was hot, dry, and I don't want to ever go back there again. Out in the middle of central Texas somewhere, someplace.
Okay, so I get a little confused on that as well. If you listen to the because I my understanding of the way he's mispronouncing this is that the other guy lives here in Texas. He's in Tennessee. All right, you'll find out why when he kind of speaks to the guy a little bit more. But I think the other guy is actually from uh, around San Antonio, Texas, or if he's still alive, I don't know.
From San Antonio.
Yeah.
Here's my interview with Alfred a desk, and it's riveting. Listen to this guy. Central Texas somewhere. I'm not sure where we are.
We're in the hill country.
They call it the hill country in Texas. With Alfred Adask, got hold and actually published, he says, more than 300, maybe up to possibly 1,000 or more of these books on the missing 13th Amendment. Alfred, tell me why Larry Dodge and the retired police officer Tom Dunn came to you with this information. Why did they bring it to you, and what did you do with it?
Tom Dunn and Larry Dodge were sitting around in a library in Belfast, Maine. Back probably 1989, in that vicinity, approximately that time frame, 90, thereabouts. And they asked the librarian to bring them the oldest copy. They were arguing something about the Constitution. They asked the librarian to bring them the oldest copy of the Constitution she had in that library, and that library went back at least into the 1800s, and I think it may have actually existed in the 1700s, if I remember correctly. She brought them the oldest copy of the Constitution they had, and they thumbed it open, and it had a 13th Amendment on it that they'd never seen before. And it involved titles of nobility. It prohibited titles of nobility, and it prohibited honors. And titles of nobility are to this day prohibited in the Constitution of the United States. They prohibit them for both the states and for the federal government. But this one not only prohibited the titles of nobility, it prohibited honors, and it provided a penalty. If you received a title of nobility, if you received an honor, you would forfeit your citizenship. That doesn't mean you'd be extradited and sent to another country. It just means that you could not hold public office, you could not vote. You were out of the political process if you took a title of nobility.
Now, sit and think about that for a minute. And just kind of breathe and relax of what he's saying. And maybe go back and re-listen to these things. All right? We go and we say, Your Honor, Your Honor, Your Honor to judges all the time. Way back then it was judge. It wasn't Your Honor. That happened later on. All right? And just saying. This would actually be awesome.
The amendment was proposed about 1810. They started researching. They said, where did this come from? They'd never heard of it before. They started researching. Turns out this missing 13th Amendment was proposed about 1810. And they needed 9 states to...
And I do know that Georgia at one time had a copy of the 13th original amendment. And I believe it was South Carolina. It may be North, but I believe it was South Carolina that actually had the original 13th Amendment as well.
Ratified. And 8 states ratified by into 1812, and the War of 1812 broke out. Everybody forgot about the amendment during the war. And in the aftermath of the war, they didn't think about it until about 1819. And I think it was President Monroe at the time. The president said, what are we going to do about this amendment? Are we going to pass this thing or not? Because they'd had 8 states voted for it, and 4 states, 5, they needed 9, and they had, I think they needed 9, but they had 4 or 5 states hadn't yet ratified or commented on it. So they contacted all these states and said, are you going to ratify or not? The problem shows up in Virginia. Virginia apparently ratified. And it is believed that they sent notice of their ratification by publishing a new edition of their state constitution, which included a copy of the United States Constitution as an appendix at the back. And this new copy of the state constitution, this new version, this new federal constitution included the missing 13th Amendment. The law that ordered them to produce and publish this new edition of the state constitution with the federal constitution, it specifically said they had to send a copy to the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, and to Thomas Jefferson. I think there were 4 people altogether. All right? But it is believed by Dodge and Dunn that it was by this means that they served notice on the federal government that they had in fact ratified this amendment. It's virtually inconceivable that they would have ordered the production of a brand new state constitution with a brand new copy of the federal Constitution with an amendment that they didn't believe belonged there.
And now, so history lesson at the time was the fire that burned all the documents. And another history lesson alleged, okay, history lesson, that Virginia kicked out all the witches out of the state. But what they called witches was actually attorneys. So it makes sense that Virginia actually signed this as well. Even though there's no proof, whatever means it was, and it may be an attorney that was in Virginia that knew about it, grabbed it, hid it, and threw it. Which, that was a big no-no. He probably would have been hung.
Virginia, of course, was the political powerhouse of the country at that time. Something like 4 of our first 5 presidents came from Virginia. It's inconceivable that Virginia would make a mistake about whether an amendment was or was not on the federal Constitution. The problem is that when Dodge and Dunn went into the Virginian archives, they can't find any records from the legislature from that time period. They just seemed to be missing. It may be they can be found today, but they couldn't be found back in the early 1990s. The result was there's not absolute proof that Virginia ratified this amendment. So there's a debate. Was it ratified by 9 states or was it not ratified by 9 states? There's a debate. But what Dodge did, David Dodge, he took his van and he started traveling around the country. And he went from archive to archive around the United States looking for evidence of this missing 13th Amendment. And it turns out that he found it in, I don't know, 8, 10, a dozen different archives. I don't know how many archives he researched, but he found 23 or 26, I don't recall the number now, this information. You're asking me about things that were fresh in my mind 15, 20 years ago, and they're not quite so fresh today. But he found 23 or 26 states and territories that had published this amendment as ratified in documents that they published over a period from 1819 up until 1870 something. Over a period of more than 50 years, this amendment had been published off and on, not always at the same time, but 26 states and territories. If it wasn't ratified, it is almost inconceivable that these states could have published this amendment by accident. I mean, the first time one of the states published it by accident, the president or somebody said, "Hey, all you hicks out there in TV land, wake up! The amendment wasn't ratified." The word should go out. You can't propagate an error like this, or you shouldn't be able to, for 50 years. Nevertheless, it was published for over 50 years. And the result is a mystery. Dodge accumulated this information. He brought it to me in part because I was publishing a magazine called The Anti-Shyster. We were critical of attorneys. It was Dodge and Dunn thought that this amendment, because...
Now, and let's go to the other one. Like I said, the shorter version, if you go to him, you'll listen without my commentary, okay? But, people, even if this is not true, somebody was smart enough to write it out. And even if we cannot get it passed in Congress, we the people can actually have that 13th Amendment ratified in our own state. Just because it's not in the state constitution or federal constitution, don't mean we cannot gather it up and petition to have this amendment added to the Constitution in the state. Okay? So that's what I kind of want to bring out and stress out enough. Because, look, this is not a complicated issue. There is too much comfort for officers in their sovereign citizen immunity. There's too much comfortability in attorneys. And there's too much comfortability in the judges that they don't have to follow the law that they wrote. And if you try to go after them, what do? Their higher ups, no wrongdoing. Oh, the bar unions, no wrongdoing. Oh, the judges, no wrongdoing. When it's clearly wrongdoings. But because of them not having that 13th Amendment, they get to violate all the laws while you sit in jail. Diesel, We the People News. Bye.